The dim-lit winery felt suffocating as I nursed my glass of Merlot, the rich aroma failing to calm my nerves. Mia's concerned gaze bore into me, her brow furrowed as she waited for me to break the tense silence. "It's Adrian," I finally confessed, my voice trembling. "He's been lying to me about everything." Mia's eyes widened, and she leaned closer, her voice hushed. "What do you mean? What happened?" I took a steadying breath, recounting the events from earlier that evening. I arrived a little early, hoping to surprise him before the tasting event started, but when I stepped into his office, I overheard a heated argument. The memory flooded back, Adrian's usually composed demeanor shattered as he hissed into the phone. "Kara, please, you have to understand." "Kara?" Mia's brow furrowed deeper. "Isn't that his wife's name?" I nodded, my throat tightening. That's when she walked in. This stunning woman, dripping in diamonds and designer labels. She took one look at me and sneered, "So, you're the latest conquest, hmm?" Tears stung my eyes as I recalled Kara's icy glare. Adrian tried to defuse the situation, but she wasn't having it. She turned to me and said, "Let me save you the trouble, dear. That man is a pathological liar, and you're just another pawn in his twisted game." Mia's mouth hung open, her hand gripping mine in a comforting squeeze. "Oh, Lena, I'm so sorry." I shook my head, anger and humiliation swirling within me. "That's not even the worst part." Kara then looked me dead in the eye and said, "If you think you know the real Adrian, you're sadly mistaken. But don't worry, you'll find out soon enough." Mia's grip tightened, her expression a mix of sympathy and fury. That's just cruel. What did Adrian say?" "He tried to brush it off, claiming Kara was just being dramatic as usual," I scoffed, the memory leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. But the way she looked at me, Mia, it was like she knew something I didn't, like she was daring me to uncover the truth. Mia's eyes narrowed, her protective instincts kicking in. "We'll get to the bottom of this, Lena. One way or another, we'll find out what kind of game Adrian is really playing." As I drained the last of my wine, a newfound determination washed over me. Kara's enigmatic warning echoed in my mind, fueling a desperate need to confront the man I thought I knew. Adrian's web of lies was unraveling, and I intended to untangle every last thread, no matter how painful the truth might be. Adrian's mansion loomed before me, its grand facade mocking the turmoil that churned within. As I stepped through the ornate double doors, the overwhelming scent of wealth assaulted my senses, a sickening blend of expensive leather and Adrian's signature cologne. He greeted me with a forced smile, his eyes betraying a flicker of unease. "Lena, my dear, I'm so glad you came." I held up a hand, cutting off his rehearsed pleasantries. "Cut the act, Adrian. We need to talk." His bravado faltered, and he ushered me into the study, closing the door behind us with a heavy thud. "I assume this is about Kara's little outburst," he began, his tone dripping with disdain. "You know how dramatic she can be." "Dramatic?" I scoffed, anger flaring within me. "She accused you of lying to me, Adrian, of using me as some kind of pawn in your twisted games." He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. "Lena, you have to understand. My marriage to Kara, it's complicated. We've been struggling for years, and her family's wealth is the only thing keeping this winery afloat." My jaw clenched as the pieces began to fall into place. "So, what? You've been using her money to fund your lavish lifestyle, all while carrying on affairs behind her back?" Adrian's eyes hardened, his mask of charm slipping. "It's not that simple. Kara knew about my indiscretions from the start, but she didn't care, as long as I played the part of the doting husband in public. It's all a facade, Lena. A game we've both been playing." I recoiled, disgust churning in my stomach. "And what about me, Adrian? Was I just another prop in your twisted little charade?" He reached for my hand, his touch sending a shiver of revulsion down my spine. "Of course not, my love. What we have is real. Everything I've done, it's all been for us, for our future together." I yanked my hand away, his words like venom seeping into my veins. "Our future?" I spat, shaking my head in disbelief. "How can you talk about our future when you've built your entire life on lies?" Adrian's jaw tightened, his eyes hardening with determination. "Because I love you, Lena, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make our dreams a reality." As he spoke those words, a chill ran down my spine. The man before me was a stranger, his charming facade crumbling to reveal a twisted, manipulative soul. And in that moment, I realized that no matter how deep my feelings ran, I could never trust a word that fell from his deceitful lips. The harsh buzz of my phone jolted me from my restless slumber. Groggily, I fumbled for the device, squinting at the caller ID. It was Mia. "Hello?" My voice was thick with exhaustion. "Lena, thank God you picked up," Mia blurted, her tone laced with urgency. "We need to talk, in person." An icy tendril of dread snaked through me. "What's going on?" "It's about Adrian," she said, her voice dropping to a hushed whisper. "I've uncovered some unsettling information." Within the hour, I found myself at Mia's doorstep, anxiety gnawing at my insides. She ushered me inside, her expression grave. "Spill it," I demanded, bracing myself for the worst. Mia took a deep breath. "Remember Samantha Wilkins from college? The one who transferred after our sophomore year?" I nodded, my brow furrowing in confusion. "Well, I ran into her at the grocery store yesterday," Mia continued, "and she mentioned something disturbing." My heart pounded in my ears as I waited for her to continue. "Apparently, she and Adrian had a fling a few years back," Mia revealed, her words like a punch to the gut. "And according to Samantha, he was stringing along multiple women at the same time, feeding them all the same lies about leaving his wife." I felt the room spin, nausea churning in my stomach. "No, it can't be." Mia's expression hardened. "That's not all. Samantha said that once Kara caught wind of Adrian's affairs, she went into full-on revenge mode. She's been gathering evidence, documenting every sordid detail, all to strip him of everything in their inevitable divorce." My head was reeling, Adrian's betrayal cutting deeper with each revelation. "But why go to such extremes?" Mia's gaze softened. "Kara's family is obscenely wealthy, Lena. If she plays her cards right, she could not only take the winery but destroy Adrian's reputation in the process." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "So while he's been playing us all for fools, his wife has been playing the long game." Mia reached out, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. "I'm so sorry, Lena. I know how much you cared for him." Tears stung my eyes as the weight of Adrian's deceit crashed over me. The man I thought I knew, the future I had envisioned, it was all a lie. A carefully constructed mirage designed to feed his insatiable ego and greed. But as the shock gave way to simmering rage, a newfound determination took root. Kara's methodical plotting had opened my eyes, and I silently vowed that Adrian would face the consequences of his actions. No matter what it took, I would ensure that he reaped the bitter harvest he had sown. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the cozy cafe, but its usual comforting scent did little to soothe my frayed nerves. I clutched my mug, the warmth seeping into my palms as I replayed Mia's words in my mind, desperate to make sense of Adrian's ever-deepening web of lies. A familiar voice sliced through the ambient chatter, causing me to stiffen in my seat. It was Kara, her perfectly coiffed appearance a stark contrast to the icy venom dripping from her words. "That snake has another thing coming, if he thinks I'll let him slither away unscathed," she hissed, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the tabletop. Across from her sat a well-dressed man, his sharp features and calculating gaze marking him as a force to be reckoned with, no doubt Kara's attorney. "Rest assured, Mrs. Bellamy," he replied, his tone clipped and professional. "My team has compiled an ironclad case against your husband. Once we expose his sordid affairs and financial misdeeds, the courts will have no choice but to strip him of everything." Kara's crimson-painted lips curved into a vindictive smile. "Good. That two-timing snake deserves to lose it all, his precious winery, his inflated ego, every last cent." My heart pounded in my chest as realization washed over me. This wasn't just a bitter divorce. It was a meticulously orchestrated takedown, and Adrian was the unfortunate target in Kara's crosshairs. "And those whores he's been cavorting with?" Kara sneered, her eyes glinting with malice. "They'll get their just desserts, too. I want their dirty little secrets dragged out into the open for everyone to see." My blood ran cold, the implications of her words sinking in like a lead weight. She wasn't just after Adrian. She was coming for all of us, his unsuspecting conquests caught in the crossfire of her vengeful crusade. The lawyer nodded, his expression betraying no emotion. "Consider it done, Mrs. Bellamy. Your husband's indiscretions will be laid bare for the world to witness." As they rose to leave, Kara's gaze momentarily locked with mine, her eyes narrowing in recognition. A cruel smirk played at the corners of her mouth, a silent taunt that sent a chill down my spine. In that fleeting moment, I understood the depth of her fury, the meticulously plotted retribution that would leave no stone unturned, no secret unexposed. And as the gravity of my own role in Adrian's downfall dawned on me, a single sobering thought took root. I was well and truly caught in the crosshairs of a war I never saw coming. The winery's grand hall buzzed with excitement as guests mingled, sipping flutes of our latest vintage. But beneath the laughter and polished veneers, a storm was brewing, a reckoning that would shake the very foundations of Adrian's carefully constructed facade. I spotted him across the room, his charming smile firmly in place as he worked the crowd like a seasoned performer. My heart clenched with a potent mix of anger and remorse, the weight of his betrayal threatening to suffocate me. Before I could second-guess myself, I strode toward him, weaving through the clusters of well-heeled socialites until I stood mere feet away. "Adrian," I called out, my voice ringing with steely resolve. He turned, his easy grin faltering as our eyes met. "Lena, darling, what a pleasure to—" "Cut the act," I snapped, my words slicing through his rehearsed pleasantries. "We need to talk, in private." His brow furrowed, but he nodded, leading me through a side door and into the shadowed confines of the empty barrel room. The heavy thud of the door closing behind us seemed to echo off the weathered oak, underscoring the weight of the confrontation to come. Adrian's mask slipped, his expression hardening. "What's this about, Lena? You're causing quite a scene." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "A scene? Please, Adrian, we both know this entire charade is one big performance." I stepped closer, my words laced with venom. "I know everything. The lies, the affairs, Kara's meticulous plan to strip you of everything you've built on deceit." His eyes widened, panic flickering across his features before he regained his composure. "Lena, whatever Kara has told you, it's not just Kara," I cut him off, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "I've heard it from others too, people you've used and discarded like pawns in your twisted games." Adrian's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing. "I see. So, you've chosen to align yourself with my vengeful wife, is that it?" I matched his steely glare, undeterred. "I've chosen to stand against your lies, Adrian, against the web of manipulation you've spun, ensnaring anyone foolish enough to fall for your charms." His lips curved into a contemptuous sneer. "And what, pray tell, do you hope to gain from this misguided crusade? A pat on the back from Kara? A fleeting sense of vindication before she casts you aside like the rest of us?" I stepped closer, my voice lowering to a fierce whisper. "I want you to face the consequences of your actions, Adrian. I want you to reap what you've sown, the pain, the humiliation, the utter destruction of everything you've built on deceit." For a moment, Adrian's mask slipped, his eyes flickering with genuine fear. But just as quickly, his bravado returned, a cruel smirk twisting his features. "Very well, my dear," he purred, his voice laced with menace. "If it's a war you want, you'll have it. But mark my words, when the dust settles, you'll deeply regret throwing in your lot with Kara." As he turned on his heel and stormed out, I couldn't help but shiver at the ominous promise lingering in his wake. But any trepidation was overshadowed by a fierce determination, a resolve to see this bitter feud through to its inevitable, catastrophic end. Come what may, Adrian would face the consequences he so richly deserved. And I would be there, standing resolute to witness his downfall. The stale air of the courtroom hung heavy, charged with tension as I took my place on the witness stand. Across the aisle, Adrian sat rigidly, his once charming veneer cracked and fading under the harsh reality of his impending reckoning. Kara's attorney, Mr. Morris, approached me, his gaze steely and calculating. "Ms. Rivers, please state your relationship to the defendant." I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. "Adrian Bellamy and I were involved in an intimate relationship for nearly a year." A murmur rippled through the courtroom, but Morris silenced it with a sharp look. "And during this time, were you aware of Mr. Bellamy's marital status?" My jaw tightened. "No, Adrian deliberately misled me, claiming he was separated from his wife." Morris nodded, his expression grave. "I see. And when did you become aware of the true nature of his deception?" The memories flooded back, the confrontation at the winery, the sickening revelations about Adrian's multiple affairs. "It was brought to my attention by Mrs. Bellamy herself," as well as other sources, that Adrian had been engaging in numerous extramarital affairs while portraying a very different public image. "Objection, Your Honor," Adrian's lawyer barked, jumping to his feet. "Hearsay and speculation." The judge fixed me with a stern look. "Ms. Rivers, please confine your testimony to first-hand knowledge and facts." I took a steadying breath. "Very well. What I can attest to is Adrian's pattern of dishonest behavior and blatant disregard for the truth. He lied to me repeatedly about the nature of his marriage, his financial situation, and his intentions for our future together." Morris nodded, his expression grim. "Thank you, Miss Rivers. No further questions for now." He turned to face the judge. "Your Honor, we would like to submit into evidence a series of documented communications between the defendant and various other women, demonstrating a clear pattern of infidelity and emotional manipulation." As the damning evidence was presented, I risked a glance at Adrian. His usual bravado had crumbled, his shoulders slumped in defeat as the weight of his transgressions bore down upon him. Morris continued his relentless assault, painting a vivid picture of Adrian's web of lies and the calculated efforts to conceal his indiscretions from his wife. With each revelation, each incriminating piece of evidence, the noose around Adrian's neck tightened. Finally, Morris turned to me once more. "Miss Rivers, in your opinion, based on your first-hand experience, what motivated the defendant's actions?" I took a deep breath, meeting Adrian's hollow gaze head-on. "Greed and ego," I stated firmly. "Adrian Bellamy is a man consumed by his own desires, willing to crush anyone and anything in his path to maintain his lavish lifestyle and inflated sense of self-worth." A deafening silence fell over the courtroom as my words hung in the air, their weight undeniable. In that moment, I saw the last remnants of Adrian's arrogant facade shatter, laying bare the ugly truth that had been festering beneath the surface all along. As I stepped down from the stand, a sense of grim satisfaction washed over me. The wheels of justice were in motion, and Adrian's carefully constructed house of cards was crumbling around him. After so many lies, so much pain and heartache, he would finally face the consequences of his actions. The cavernous interior of Adrian's once opulent home echoed with a deafening silence, its grand furnishings and lavish decor now mere relics of a life built on deceit. As I stepped into the dimly lit foyer, the weight of his downfall seemed palpable, a tangible presence hanging in the stale air. "Lena?" Kara's voice sliced through the stillness, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she emerged from the shadows. "I'm glad you could make it." I nodded, my gaze drifting to the packed boxes lining the walls. "So, it's really happening. He's losing everything." A ghost of a smile played across Kara's perfectly painted lips. "Oh, it's far more than that, my dear. Adrian's reckoning has been a long time coming." She beckoned me to follow, leading me into the study, where Adrian had once spun his tangled web of lies. The remnants of his former life were scattered about, half-empty bottles of scotch, framed photos lying face down, a forgotten cigar smoldering in an ashtray. "Do you know why I fought so hard to strip him of all this?" Kara mused, her fingers trailing along the edge of the ornately carved desk. "It wasn't just about the money or the winery. It was about unveiling the truth, about tearing down the facade he so carefully constructed." I tensed, sensing an undercurrent of something darker lurking beneath her words. "What do you mean?" Kara's gaze found mine, her eyes glinting with a chilling intensity. "I knew about his affairs from the beginning, Lena. Every sordid tryst, every empty promise whispered in the throes of passion. I catalogued it all, biding my time until the perfect moment to strike." A shiver ran down my spine as the full extent of her meticulously plotted revenge dawned on me. "You used me, us, all of his mistresses, just pawns in your game." Her delicate shoulders rose in an elegant shrug. "A necessary sacrifice, I'm afraid. You see, Adrian's greatest downfall wasn't his insatiable appetite for infidelity. It was his arrogance, his unwavering belief that he could continue to spin his lies indefinitely without consequence." I recoiled, sickened by the calculated cruelty behind her actions. "So, what? You decided to teach him a lesson by destroying not just his life, but the lives of anyone caught in the crossfire?" Kara's gaze hardened, her voice taking on a razor-sharp edge. "Some lessons, dear Lena, can only be learned through the harshest of methods. Adrian needed to lose everything, his wealth, his status, his fragile sense of superiority, and if collateral damage was unavoidable in that pursuit, then so be it. As her words hung in the air, I found myself questioning the lines between justice and retribution, vengeance and vindication. Kara's actions, however calculated, had left a trail of devastation in their wake. Lives upended, reputations shattered, all in service of her single-minded quest for revenge. And in that moment, as I stood amidst the ruins of Adrian's former life, I couldn't help but wonder, had we, his unwitting pawns, simply traded one devil for another? The crisp autumn breeze carried the faint scent of change as I settled onto the worn leather couch, my therapist's gentle gaze fixed upon me with a patient understanding. It had been months since the explosive downfall of Adrian Bellamy, and yet the reverberations of that tumultuous chapter still echoed within me. "How are you feeling today, Lena?" Dr. Wilkins prompted, her voice a soothing balm against the memories that threatened to resurface. I took a steadying breath, gathering my thoughts. Better, I think. It's been a process, coming to terms with everything that happened. Her brow furrowed with concern. The sense of betrayal must have been overwhelming, not just from Adrian, but from Kara as well, using you and the others as pawns in her revenge. A rueful smile tugged at my lips. That's an understatement. For a while, I felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies and manipulation, unable to trust my own judgment. Dr. Wilkins nodded, her expression one of quiet empathy. Yet here you are, emerging from that storm stronger and wiser. What has helped you find solid ground again? The answer came easily, a newfound sense of purpose burning brightly within me. Helping others who have been through similar situations, lending an understanding ear, offering guidance and resources, it's been cathartic in a way. A proud smile graced the therapist's features. That's wonderful, Lena. Turning your pain into a catalyst for positive change is an incredibly brave and selfless act. As our session drew to a close, I stepped out into the crisp air, inhaling deeply. The weight that had once threatened to crush me had lightened, replaced by a steely resolve and a profound sense of growth. Later that evening, as I sipped a glass of rich Cabernet, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Mia, her voice tinged with a mix of sympathy and triumph. "Lena, did you hear? Adrian's been spotted, living out of a run-down motel on the outskirts of town." A pang of something indescribable tugged at my heart, a strange amalgam of pity and vindication. The man who had once commanded such wealth and prestige had been reduced to a shadow of his former self, his grand ambitions crumbling beneath the weight of his own misdeeds. "I did hear, yeah," I replied, my voice steady. "It's a lot to take in, seeing how far he's fallen." Mia's tone softened. "Are you going to be okay? I know this whole ordeal has been incredibly difficult for you." A soft, resolute smile curved my lips as I gazed out at the setting sun, its warm hues painting the sky in vibrant shades of redemption. "I'm going to be just fine, Mia. In fact, I've never felt more ready to embrace the future, one free from Adrian's twisted lies and the toxic cycles of deceit." As I uttered those words, a profound sense of peace washed over me, a quiet affirmation that the darkest chapters of our lives possess the power to reshape us, to forge us into beacons of strength and resilience. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was crystal clear. I would never again surrender my truth to the whims of those who sought to diminish it. Adrian's reign of deception had met its demise, and in its ashes, a fiercer, wiser version of myself was rising, ready to face the world on my own terms.
I married an older man, Jeff, 5 years ago. At first, he really cherished me. But as time passed, he started to treat me coldly. His daughter, Paige, whom I adored like my own, eventually started mocking me, just like her dad. Despite this, I kept enduring it, thinking we're family.
"You've gotten fat like a pig. I wish I had a cuter wife."
Seriously, it's so embarrassing when you show up at school. Don't come to parent-teacher conferences, okay? That was the last straw for me. My name is Rita. I'm a 32-year-old office worker. 5 years ago, I married Jeff, who is 5 years older. We met through a dating app. He was a man full of charisma, and I quickly fell for his charm. After dating for a year, he proposed and we got married. But when I told my parents, they were hesitant. They were concerned about him being 5 years older and his daughter, Paige. He was divorced, with his previous marriage ending due to his wife's infidelity. He took custody of their 5-year-old daughter, Paige. I had met her a few times. She was a shy but adorable child. I convinced my worried parents that I could make it work with a man who had a child. I truly loved Jeff and wanted to be Paige's mother. My persistence paid off, and my parents eventually gave their blessing. I wish I could say these past 5 years of marriage have been blissful, but they haven't. The first year or so was okay. Back then, Jeff was kind, and Paige was affectionate towards me. But things started to go downhill. He began to ridicule me, and she started to mimic his behavior. She began to adopt his arrogant attitude towards me. I knew spoiling her wasn't good for her, but he wouldn't let me discipline her. Whenever I scolded her for misbehaving or urged her to study, he would complain. Even if I argued back, he would twist my words and shut down my arguments. Eventually, I got tired of their comments and stopped trying to discipline her. One day, Jeff yelled at me when he saw what I had made for dinner.
Hey, there are vegetables in this again. I've told you I hate vegetables. How many times do I have to tell you?
Oh, come on. They're good for you. I've chopped them up finely and mixed them in, so eat a little.
I never asked you to do that. Just listen to what I say. Now go make a meat dish already.
He was extremely picky and refused to eat any vegetables. He also didn't like fish much and demanded that I cook meat dishes. Meanwhile, Paige had completely opposite demands. Mom, didn't I tell you I don't eat meat? Why can't you remember? A fish meunière? That's definitely high in calories. Are you trying to sabotage my diet? I'm not trying to upset you, but you've gotten really thin lately. You'll get sick if you keep this up. It would be good for you to eat some meat. Stop it! I'm on a diet, so being thin is fine. Don't do anything to stop me. I'm only eating vegetables. Paige, unlike her father, hated meat and would only eat vegetables. She refused to eat fish dishes like meunière or fried ones, claiming they were bad for her diet. She was obsessed with becoming thinner, wanting to be a model. It was almost like she was bordering on an eating disorder, and she insisted that I cook low-calorie, diet-friendly meals for her. The difference in their demands made meal planning a constant struggle for me. I ended up preparing about 10 dishes centered around meat and vegetables each. It was a huge burden, both in terms of effort and cleaning up. Despite my struggles, they would both complain about the dishes being too tough or too fattening. It wasn't just cooking that was tough. They expected me to do all the housework, washing dishes, laundry, and cleaning. After meals, Jeff would lounge on the living room sofa watching TV. Paige would be next to him, engrossed in her mobile games. Paige, please take your dishes to the kitchen. And could you at least fold your laundry? I tried to get her to help with the housework, but he always stopped me. She would complain, playing right into his hands. Ugh, that's so annoying. Dad, Mom's being mean to me. He naturally supported her.
You're just trying to boss Paige around because she's not your real daughter. Take better care of our daughter. You don't need to do the housework, Paige. That's Rita's job.
Thanks, Dad. Mom really is terrible, isn't she? She can't even make a satisfying meal. At least she could do the housework right. As they gossiped about me, all I could do was sigh. He prevented her from doing housework, but he didn't help either. He insisted.
Housework is a woman's job.
Leaving it all to me. Even though we both worked, I had to shoulder all the household chores. And because they were so picky, they often left food untouched. It felt wasteful, so I ended up eating the leftovers and gradually gained weight. Then both Jeff and Paige started hurling insults at me.
Aren't you eating too much? You've been gaining weight lately. How about dieting a bit? Paige is slim and cute. Aren't you embarrassed?
Yeah, eating our leftovers is so gross. I don't need a fat mom. Don't walk next to me when we're outside. Who do they think is to blame for my weight gain? Dealing with their insults while juggling work and housework was stressful. I found myself stress eating, and then they'd mock me, making me eat even more. I was stuck in this vicious cycle. One day, when I looked in the mirror, I saw a chubby woman with rough skin. Realizing that woman was me was a huge shock. I'm only 32, but I looked almost like I was in my 40s. Before I got married, I used to care about fashion and makeup, but as life got harder, I lost that luxury. I wanted to escape this life, but I couldn't bring myself to consider divorce. To make matters worse, Jeff got laid off from his job. It seemed to be due to the recession. He was supposedly looking for another job, but nothing seemed to come up. He could have done some part-time work, but he refused, saying he didn't want to work in a low-level job. When he wasn't job hunting, he just made a mess at home all day. I'm fed up when I come home tired from work and see trash scattered on the table and floor. Even when I confronted Jeff about it, he showed no remorse. Hey, since you're home, can you at least throw the trash in the bin?
What? You should just pick it up and clean it up yourself. I've worked hard for this family until now. Just taking a break until I find my next job.
I was furious at his attitude, as if he was the only one who had worked for the family. Paige, too, sided with her lounging dad. That's right, Mom. Dad has been working hard to the point of exhaustion. Stop saying mean things. But Paige, I'm also tired from work, you know. I have to do the housework, too. But it's a mom's job to take care of the house, right? And don't be so selfish over such a small thing. With her support, Jeff became even more arrogant without even working. I was truly fed up every day. One day, I became so exhausted that I fell ill with a fever. Even then, Jeff demanded that I do housework.
Where's dinner? Stop lying around and get to it. Housework is your job.
I'm sick with a fever and feeling awful. Sorry, but you'll have to manage on your own for a while.
Such a useless wife.
Even when I was clearly unwell, he had no words of care. Instead, he complained about not getting housework done. Then, he took Paige out to eat, leaving me struggling to prepare my own meal. After lying in bed for 2 days, I finally got better, only to find the house in a terrible state. Pizza boxes and bottles were scattered on the floor. Laundry was piled up. It was a mess, as expected, with no one to clean up. On the table, there was a note in a commanding tone, probably from Jeff saying,
Clean all of this up.
Next to it was another note, in Paige's handwriting. You didn't cook, so I gained weight. Worst mom ever. I felt I couldn't take it anymore. The next day, as I was cleaning up, Jeff and Paige were lounging in the living room as usual. I continued cleaning, despite being fed up with their mocking conversation.
You really look like a fat pig now. When we got married, you were much cuter. I feel cheated having a wife like a pig. I wish you'd pay me alimony.
That's right. All the moms of my classmates are pretty and stylish. But our mom is so unfashionable and fat.
Sorry, Paige. If I had married a younger and prettier wife, you could have bragged to your friends.
It's not Dad's fault. It's because of our fat mom. It's embarrassing when you come to school, Mom. Don't ever come to parent-teacher conferences, okay? Their words were the last straw for me. I slammed the dish I was washing into the sink, making a loud noise. They stared at me in surprise. I looked at them, smiled, and said, I understand how you feel. If you don't like me that much, I'll stop being your mom. They seemed confused by my words, murmuring, Huh? I left them behind and walked out of the house. After that, I relied on friends and acquaintances, moving from place to place. I had previously confided in them about Jeff and Paige. Because of this, when I asked to stay, they all sympathized and gladly let me stay. I was deeply grateful to my kind friends. I stayed with friends and continued to go to work, but I didn't return to the house where my husband and daughter were. Feeling bad for always staying over, I bought groceries with my own money and cooked meals for them. My friends enjoyed every dish, saying, "Delicious." The difference from Jeff and Paige, who always complained, was night and day. 2 days after I left home, I received emails from Jeff and Paige.
Hey, how long are you going to sulk? Running away from home just because you got a little scolded? You're not a kid. Stop this nonsense and come back home to do your housework.
Mom, why are you throwing a tantrum just because you heard the truth? Stop being annoying for attention and come back and cook. They complained about me in emails, conveniently ignoring their own faults. It was clear they didn't think they did anything wrong. I didn't respond to the emails and just left them be. I had already explained the situation to my parents to some extent. They were angry I hadn't consulted them earlier, but were also very worried. When they told me I could come back home anytime, I couldn't help but cry. I had convinced them quite forcefully to accept my marriage to Jeff with his daughter Paige, so I thought they might say,
"You made your bed, now lie in it."
But they welcomed me with open arms, which was a huge relief. A week passed as I stayed with various friends. By then, Jeff and Paige's emails became more humble, with messages like,
"I was wrong,"
and "Sorry, Mom." But I doubted they were truly remorseful. I decided it was time to end things with them. When I returned home, after a week, the house was in a mess, with garbage scattered everywhere. Seeing me, Jeff and Paige immediately started complaining.
"Where have you been? The house is a disaster because of you. Clean it up now."
Mom, you're finally back. Make dinner now. I'm sick of delivery food. Their words confirmed they hadn't learned their lesson. I was ready to make my decision. Ignoring their continued complaints, I presented them with a signed divorce agreement. Their eyes widened as I continued. You're unhappy with a fat, unattractive mom like me, right? Then, let's get a divorce. I'm sick of taking care of both of you. They panicked, with Jeff yelling,
"What about the living expenses?"
and Paige screaming, "Who's going to do the housework and cooking?" Jeff, you just need to start working quickly, and both of you can do the housework. Not my concern anymore.
"Don't say such nonsense. I won't divorce, especially after you ran away from home."
That's when I pulled out a recording of Jeff and Paige hurling insults at me. I had been gathering evidence, anticipating a divorce. If you won't agree to divorce, I'll sue. You're unemployed and have no money. Can you even afford to pay alimony? He turned pale and reluctantly signed the divorce agreement. Afterward, I received $14,000 in compensation for mental anguish and another $14,000 for half of our shared assets in the divorce. Paige stayed with Jeff, of course. Later, I rented a stylish apartment for singles and started a comfortable life alone. Miraculously, as I ate balanced meals and lived hygienically, my weight dropped significantly. In 6 months, I lost about 20 pounds, and everything I wore looked great on me. I returned to enjoying fashion and makeup, and in my 30s, I entered a phase where I was more popular than ever. A few months after the divorce, I ran into Jeff and Paige at a shopping mall. He had become fat and filthy, and she was extremely thin and unkempt, probably from eating whatever they liked without considering nutrition. When they recognized me, transformed and beautiful, they said,
"You look so different and pretty."
And, "Be my mom again." Of course, I firmly refused. They were crying, but they were strangers to me now. I left them there and walked away from the mall, feeling truly liberated from the burden of caring for them. I was free to enjoy my life, being true to myself. That's the promise I made to myself and you. Jeff and his daughter Paige was so terrible to Rita. After taking advantage of Rita and treating her like their servant and saying terrible things about her, seeing Jeff get fat and Paige being thin and unkempt, they got what they deserved. I really hope Rita will enjoy her life of freedom. Thanks for watching until the end. Please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.
Is there anything in the world that should be a higher priority than one's own family? Listen to the story of one man who puts his own convenience and feelings first and ended up in a pitiful way. My name is Leah. I'm a 35-year-old housewife, busy every day working part-time, doing housework, and raising a child. My husband Joshua is an ordinary office worker, and we have our 4-year-old daughter Zoe. She is our princess. My daughter is growing up well, and I feel like we have a perfect life together. Our marriage is relatively happy, and I have no complaints about my husband. I thought that our days would continue to be peaceful. But my daily life was disrupted by a certain event. What? Your sister is pregnant? The news took me by surprise. Because my sister-in-law had always said that she would be single for the rest of her life, and that she would be devoted to her work. She was what you would call a career woman, and I secretly respected her for that. Congratulations! What's he like? Is there going to be a wedding soon? When I asked my husband, he looked at me like he was uncomfortable to answer. My sister's partner has a wife and kids. What? Well, my sister was more passionate about it. She knew he has married for a long time and continued the relationship anyway. Then she found out she was pregnant and he ran away and disappeared. So she decided to have the baby alone. Oh, is that so? It's a lot to deal with, huh? To be honest, as a married woman, I was a bit uncomfortable that she would have a relationship with someone she knew to be married. But I decided to be happy for her pregnancy. So it seems that she's going to go back to her parents' house to raise her child. Even though my parents are still there, it must be a lot of work. I'm thinking of checking in on her until things settle down, you know. I understand his concerns for his unmarried sister who is going to have a baby. That's why I accepted my husband's proposal. Okay, let me know if there's anything I can do. Thanks, I appreciate it. You take care of Zoe for me, please. I guess my parents and I would be enough to deal with the situation. I was a little touched that my husband is a really kind person. I knew he was a good father. That's what I thought at the time. Time passed, and my sister-in-law gave birth to a healthy baby boy. His name was Aaron. I thought it'd be inconvenient for them that we visit right after the birth. so I decided to see the baby after things had settled down. But then I started to notice something strange in my husband.
Hey, Mom, isn't Dad coming home today?
Sorry, honey. He's busy right now. Let's be patient a little longer.
I wish I could talk to Daddy.
Zoe's words made my heart ache. My husband hasn't come home for days now. Since my sister-in-law gave birth, my husband only comes home about 2 days a week. The rest of the days, he spends at his parents' house. I accepted my husband's proposal, but I never imagined it would go this far. Hey, Joshua, I think this is a little too weird. You should come home a little more often. Zoe misses you. I called my husband and told him right away. But he said, "What are you talking about? She has a baby now and it's the hardest time of her life." My husband got upset, saying I was selfish and handed the phone to his parents. "Hello, Leah. I'm sorry, but we just had a newborn baby. If you have a child too, you would understand that, right?" "It's true. You know our daughter has no husband. Why don't you show a little compassion?" Neither my parents-in-law nor my husband seemed to think this situation is unusual. That a father comes home only 2 days a week. After that, I patiently continued to ask my husband for help. Then he said, "Leah, I didn't know you were such a cold person. All right, I'll come home." And he started coming home except on weekdays, but clearly he wasn't happy. I was angry at his attitude, but my daughter was so happy to see her daddy back that I swallowed my anger. Then one day,
Hey, where the hell are you?
I called my husband in a harsh tone. "Where am I? Of course I'm at my parents'."
What? It's Zoe's birthday today. I told you yesterday. Why don't you come home?
"What? Today is the day we are having dinner at my parents' house, you know. Besides, I have to bathe Aaron later." "Huh? Whose father are you?" By the time I raised my voice, the phone was already off the hook. My husband didn't come home that day after all.
I wonder, Daddy doesn't like me? I wish we could have had birthday cake together.
Zoe murmured with a dejected look on her face. "Daddy's busy at work today,
So let's eat cake with Mommy today, okay?
I almost cried myself as I watched my daughter's sad face as she puts the cake in her mouth, fighting back tears. "Whose father are you? What is with you and your sister?" "Well, it's..." "What? Is there something?" "No, it's not like that. It's just she's going through a lot, so I have to be there for her." "But your mom and dad are at home. Why do you need to be there too?" When I asked him about it, he just looked at me like I was the bad guy. I remember when my husband and I decided to get married, my sister-in-law said this to me. "I thought my brother loved me the most, but I'm glad he finally found the right person." At the time, I just thought my sister-in-law was a wonderful, independent career woman, and thought they cared for each other deeply as a brother and a sister. But isn't that all? My suspicion grew. Some time passed, and Aaron turned 1 year old. We decided to have a birthday party at my parents-in-law's house. To be honest, I didn't want to go.
Is Aaron getting bigger? I want to play with him.
My daughter said so innocently. And it's her cousin's birthday, so I decided to take her to the party. "Let's celebrate Aaron's birthday with the whole family," my husband said. You weren't there for Zoe's birthday. I remembered how she was sad that day, but said nothing. On the day of the party, we dressed Zoe in her favorite dress and left for my in-laws' house. My husband had gone back to his parents-in-law's house the day before, so it was just me and Zoe. After a year of this lifestyle, it had become the norm. My husband is away on a lot of business trips, and it feels like that. When we arrived at my parents-in-law's house, there was a lot of food, decorations, and presents for Aaron. We're all lined up.
Happy birthday, Aaron!
Zoe showed Aaron the presents and handed them to his mother, the sister-in-law. Wow, Aaron, I'm so happy for you. Without a word of thanks, the sister-in-law walked right past Zoe. I got the impression that she has become a bit of a bad person. She didn't used to be like this. My daughter seemed a little hurt by her attitude, and I had a sore look on her face. At this point, I was in the mood to go home. Then my husband, who was already drunk, called my daughter and said, "Zoe, come here." Zoe felt happy to be called by her father and ran to him smiling. "Zoe is going to be Aaron's wife in the future, okay?" he said. What the? I was about to say something, but my daughter replied,
No, I am going to marry William.
"William? Who's that?"
William? He's my friend from preschool. He's smart and cool. I like William.
Zoe said this and tried to tell him what happened at the preschool. Then, my husband suddenly, "No, you were going to marry Aaron. Don't think about anything else." He yelled at her like a crazy person. I couldn't help but storm over to my husband. "Hey, what are you saying? Zoe is scared." "You, Leah, you should at least discipline your daughter. She can't have a boyfriend." "I can't believe you'd say such a thing to your own daughter." Moreover, my sister-in-law said, "I'm looking forward to the wedding. Don't let Zoe go out with anyone." Leah, understood? She wasn't joking. She looked serious. It was even creepier that my parents-in-law were laughing as if they agreed with my sister-in-law. I can't take it anymore. I don't want to be in this place one more second. I couldn't help but raise my voice. "Don't be ridiculous. Zoe is a person, not a puppet." I took my daughter by the hand and left my parents-in-law's house. She's never had a grown man yell at her like that before, and she was sobbing her eyes out.
That's not Daddy. That's not Daddy. That's not Daddy. Right, Mommy?
I hugged her tight and made up my mind. I don't need him. He's a lousy husband and father. I took immediate action. To protect my daughter, I decided that she and I would stay with my parents for a while. Finally, about 2 weeks after we separated, I received a call from my husband. "Hey, where are you?" I didn't have to answer that question. "What do you want?" I can't believe he found out we'd move out after 2 weeks. I guess that means he didn't come home at all. After all, he doesn't care about me or our daughter. "What's wrong with you? How's Zoe?" My husband asked impatiently. I don't have to answer that question either. Bye. With that, I hang up the phone. I wanted to avoid any contact between Zoe and my husband for a while, so I didn't tell him where we were. But then, he started contacting me every day. "Come on, Leah. Tell me where you are. I need to see Zoe. We are family. Being separate from each other is not right." And when I wouldn't tell him where we were, he finally exploded in anger. Don't turn Zoe around for your reasons. Who are you to tell me what to do? He was so selfish that I got angry and yelled at him over the phone. If you were going to talk like that, you might as well come here. I'll give you the facts. When I told my husband that I was staying at my parents' house, he visited me right away that weekend. When Zoe saw my husband, she quickly hid behind me. He was shocked by her reaction. Zoe, hey, it's Daddy. What's wrong?
I don't like you. You scare me. I want Mommy. Mommy only. She grabbed my clothes and wouldn't let go. Deciding it was too dangerous to continue, I took my husband outside. Zoe, why? He's holding his head in his hands. You see, it's not me who's rejecting you. It's Zoe. Of course she rejects you. After you yelled at her like that. No wonder she hates you. A father who never comes home and puts his nephew before her. But I did it for my sister's sake. Whose father are you? What is your sister to you? My husband is silent. I asked my parents to take care of my daughter for now and decided to go to a nearby coffee shop to talk with my husband about the future. As soon as I got to the table, I presented the divorce papers to my husband. He looked at me with a stunned expression on his face. Please, divorce me. I want to get away from you, and so does Zoe. I only wanted to do it for my sister. I thought you and Zoe would understand. I don't understand what he's saying anymore. Why do we have to go along with your selfishness? I came down hard on my husband, demanding to know what he had been doing and saying. I could have laughed it off if you had joked about Zoe becoming Aaron's wife. But you yelled at her and never apologized. Do you have any idea how much it hurt Zoe? And how much she cried? You are always talking about yourself. I ask you again, what does your sister mean to you? She doesn't seem like just a sister to me. Then, my husband began to whisper the truth. My husband and his sister were really close. They traveled together to hot springs and overseas, sent each other presents to each other's birthdays, and they always shared a room together at home. When my sister-in-law found out that my husband and I were getting married, she told me that she thought my brother loved her the most. I knew it was to be expected, but they were siblings with an unusual and extraordinary emotional connection. I don't have a relationship with her, you know, but I love her. I love her as a person, and I love her as a sister. So when I found out that she was going to have a baby without being married, I wanted to help her. Having Aaron and Zoe get married was my husband and sister-in-law's idea. If we can't be together, then let our children get married. How horrifying. The reason behind the husband neglecting his wife and daughter. I see the whole picture now. Do you think I'm going to let you get away with it? I will never forgive you for your cruelty to Zoe. And how dare you can say family should be together? My husband kept his head down and said in a quiet voice, My sister is moving out soon. She's getting married. Huh? So you were just going to get lonely and try to make us a family again? That's not going to happen. My husband's immediate response was to hang on to me. Please, I'll be a good father from now on. I'll be a good husband. Please, Leah. He bowed his head. Give me a break. I don't trust you anymore. Zoe feels the same way. We don't trust your parents and your sister too.
It's completely insane that people can smile so openly about what happened at the birthday party. Since then, Zoe has never been able to speak well to any adults outside of me and my parents. She just wanted to celebrate her cousin's birthday. You destroyed her innocent soul. I won't let you do it anymore, and I will never forgive you. I want a divorce. I'll get custody. I can't leave my daughter with you. What do you say? I've just completely cut off my husband's lifeline. Goodbye, I said coldly. I will do everything I can for my daughter. Always have and always will. I became a mother with a determination. After that, my husband and I divorced. I got custody of my daughter, and he's paying me monthly child support. After the divorce, he moved back in with his parents. I guess the separation from his daughter was very hard on him because he started missing a lot of work and eventually resigned. He's now unemployed and reckless. I know this because his parents are kind of enough to tell me what's going on with him. Please give him a chance. He's Zoe's father after all. I'm not going back together with him. If I did, there's no point of getting a divorce. He had it all coming. It's not right for him to come crying to me now. There must be another reason why my husband is in such a miserable state, and it's just not the divorce. My sister-in-law, with whom he has an unusual relationship, has moved out. By the way, my sister-in-law is married to the father of Aaron, the man she had an unfaithful relationship. He divorced his wife and remarried my sister-in-law, and were forced to pay his ex-wife a considerable amount of alimony. His sister is also in a difficult situation financially. Well, if she wanted to marry him, even if she had to pay the price, I guess that's fine. But I hear that their marriage is quickly deteriorating due to their financial difficulties. Money's tight, and the typical ending is near. As for me, I quit my part-time job after the divorce and got a full-time job. I'm raising my daughter with the help of my parents. Just knowing that my daughter is happy and enjoying her life makes me, her mother, happy. I'm glad I had her, and I'm grateful to my ex-husband for giving me this child. On my birthday, Zoe baked a cake with my mother and wrote me a letter.
Thank you for everything, Mom. You make me so proud of you. I love you.
My daughter hugs me. Thank you. I love you too, Zoe. I would do anything for her. I would overcome anything. A mother cannot rest to protect her daughter's smile.
My husband used up our savings to buy an apartment to live with his parents. He went nuts after our divorce.
My parents really wanted to move, so I bought it for them.
Huh? What do you mean? My husband used our savings to buy an apartment for his parents without discussing it with me.
We just have to save up again. Anyway, I don't need you telling me what to do with my own money.
Ah, he is totally gone. I felt nothing, not even sadness or anger, like I was suddenly pulled down into a purgatory of nothingness. And then, I slowly grabbed his hands. I met my husband Eric at my college party. He was sitting across from me on the sofa, and I noticed him glancing at me. As the hour passed by, and the party was at its peak, he and I went out on the quiet corner of the lawn hitting up a conversation. We had the same hobbies and interests, and it was exciting to chat with him. We exchanged our numbers and started dating. He proposed to me after 2 years when I was 25. It was my dream to marry young and start a family, so I said yes to him. We got a one-bedroom apartment close to his parents, and I quit my job and became a housewife as he requested. Soon after that, I got pregnant and had a son, Mark. Around this time, my in-laws started inviting us to their house often. They never contacted me directly, but asked me through Eric. I understood that they really wanted to see their grandson. They actually adored Mark and bought a lot of toys for him. Mark, who was very attached to me, was quickly used to them. However, every time I was at their house, I got an awkward feeling. "Stacy, if you're too busy with housework, you don't have to come over. We are happy just the Eric and Mark."
It feels claustrophobic here.
They seemed like they wanted to get rid of me. Mark was still little and cried when I wasn't around. I wasn't comfortable leaving him alone with elderly in-laws, so I stayed put no matter how they tried to throw me out. I guess they weren't pleased with my aloofness, that their attitude toward me became nastier. One day, when I was cleaning the house, I received a call from Eric. He was panicking over the phone because his mom called an ambulance for hitting her pinky against the table. He gave me the name of the hospital and told me to go ASAP. She just banged her pinky. Why was I sent to check on her just for that? I just did the same a few minutes ago. I was about to protest, but he hung up on me. Reluctantly, I went out to the hospital. When I was walking toward the reception counter, I saw my mother-in-law sitting in the waiting room. She was chattering with other elderlies, but when I called out to her, "Aha, I bumped it a little. Eric is overreacting. Don't slack on chores and go home." Who exaggerated it by calling an ambulance? I stopped doing my chores to come here just for you. I don't deserve to be told slacking. As I started walking away, I heard her telling the others about me. "My daughter-in-law is really bad at taking care of housework and so lazy. I don't know what to do with her. On top of it, she's mean." I couldn't hear after that and just kept walking. I complained to Eric when he got home that night, but he only said,
"Whatever, it's all good,"
and kept drinking beer. I got upset with his indifference. How the hell is it all good?
God, you're annoying. Stop complaining. I'm exhausted from work.
He got mad at me, and we started the Cold War. We didn't speak to each other for about a week. I became uneasy that Eric might not give me the living expense for the next month. He was in charge of handling the family finance, and I usually got a monthly allowance to make ends meet. If he didn't, I wouldn't have been able to do so. Too worried that I apologized to him, who willing to accept it, and we went back to our normal life like nothing ever happened. Who knew something bigger was to come? Eric dropped the bomb just 3 days after we made it up. His mom had trouble walking, so we were to move in with them. I, of course, refused. I plan to go back to work after Mark starts middle school. I can't continue looking after her.
Well then, we are getting a divorce. You're a housewife, so you won't be able to support Mark. I will take custody.
I couldn't retort to his comment. In fact, I was unemployed and didn't have the means to raise him. Even if I found a job now, where was I going to leave him? My parents lived with my brother, his wife, and their 5 kids. I couldn't put more weight on their shoulders. I had no choice but to accept his demand again. We were to break the contract of our apartment and move in with his parents at the end of the month. On the day of our move, his parents cheerfully welcomed Eric and Mark, but to me, they commanded the detailed rules of the house and instructed me to ask for their permission before I went out. There was nothing welcoming about it. Since then, their discrimination against me escalated. One day, I came back from grocery shopping a little before noon. I saw empty boxes of pizza on the kitchen counter, and it seemed like the family had just finished eating lunch. I clearly told them when I left, "I will make lunch, so please wait for me." "Oh, Stacy, we're craving pizza, so we ordered in. We left some for you on the dining table." "Thank you." I went to the dining room and opened the box. There was one piece of pizza inside. I felt frustrated to be left out again. The piece wasn't even whole, with a chunk missing on the side. Probably Mark had a bite. I didn't even get a complete piece of pizza. I felt like Mark was even mocking me, and my eyes became watery. Another time, the rain suddenly started while I was out. I had left our sneakers under the sun, so I rushed back home. When I got back, I found that my mother-in-law had already taken Eric and Mark's sneakers, but left mine out soaked in the rain. Eric and my father-in-law pretend to be oblivious. At lunch and dinner, if I served with a big sharing plate, they immediately took all without leaving any of me. So I served them separately with a single serving next time. They complained it was too small. Such was my life. In the end, I kept my own portion on the side before serving them and ate it secretly after they finished. I had been trying my best to not explode with anger, but I finally had enough and was about to plead with Eric for moving out, but...
"Hey, I bought a new apartment. I will take you to see it. You'd like it for sure."
I was flabbergasted. We never discussed such a matter, and where did the money come from? I was rushed to go and see it with him. It was a brand new apartment building in the center of the town. There was a mall, school, government office, and post office nearby. It was in a very convenient location. The apartment was just finished built a couple weeks ago. We entered the room at the corner of 8th floor. It was unbelievably bright, big, and had a great view. It was almost perfect. The moment I was about to ask him about the most important matter.
"My parents say they really want to live here. I bought it with the sale of their house and all the savings. Isn't it amazing?"
What? What the hell did he say? It was his parents' wish? Spend all the saving that was supposed to be for our son's education and our retirement. What in the world was so amazing about it? How could you do such a selfish thing? Please cancel the contract. I was in total panic and begged him to cancel.
"Huh? We just start saving again. Anyway, I don't need you to telling me what to do with my own money. A housewife has no say in this."
He snapped back at me. "You told me to quit my job and stay at home." The word divorce popped into my head, and I ran out of the apartment. When I got home, my father-in-law was watching TV, and my mother-in-law was busy on the phone. I hurried to collect the necessary things and pack them in the bag. Then I scrolled down "Let's Divorce" on a piece of paper and left it with my wedding ring on the desk. I rushed out of the house carrying Mark, who was half asleep. "Let's get a room in a motel for now." We were wandering the street on foot without knowing what to do next. Then I heard a woman's voice calling me. "Stacy, isn't that you?" "Oh my God, is it?" I turned around and knew immediately who she was. "It's me, Amy. Remember me? Such a long time." She was my high school friend. We kept in touch after graduation, but we eventually became estranged. She got divorced from her husband who cheated on her and came back to her hometown last year. I told her about what had been going on in my life and mentioned divorce as well. She smirked and said, "I know the best divorce lawyer. I will pass you his contact." The lawyer happened to be the same guy with whom I had a crush in high school. I remembered him clearly. I wanted to give him a birthday present, but there were already many decorations and gifts around his locker. I went to another locker he used for the tennis club, but it was also the same. So I took a bus to his home But this time, his mailbox was too small, and there was a barking dog in front of yard that I couldn't get to the porch. I didn't have the courage to directly give it to him, so I gave up and went home, a bittersweet memory of my youth. I got the location and phone number of his office and thanked Amy over and over when we parted. I couldn't waste a second, so I went directly to see him after that. I didn't book an appointment ahead of time, but I just needed to do something. A friendly middle-aged woman in the front assisted me and said I was in luck, that there was a cancellation. She even offered to babysit Mark and took me to the office. I waited for a little while, then Mr. Jackson showed up. He was handsome back then, but his good look was polished by age and he was gorgeous. Not only his face, but his body looked toned, and the way he carried himself in the suit was to die for. Compared to him, Eric was like Gollum.
Thanks for waiting. I'm Adam Jackson. Nice meeting you.
He introduced himself as he pulled out his business card. I did likewise, but I noticed my voice was shaking. I apologized for showing up without an appointment, and then briefed him on the reason for my visit. He started asking me questions, but I had a hard time focusing. On top of his good appearance, his voice was a beautiful tenor. As I was listening to him, I couldn't stop imagining him getting better with age like George Clooney. We were in the office for about an hour and a half. It was the happiest time of my life in a long while. I thanked Adam and the woman vigorously before I left. Mark had been a good boy all this time, and I swore to myself to be strong for him. While I got temporary custody, Adam continued negotiation with Eric attorney. Of course, he wasn't willing to settle easily, and was too carried away by his rage that he couldn't even think straight. Hence, we went to a trial.
Don't worry, it happens often. I got this.
Adam tried to soothe my anxiety. I got a ride from him to the court on the day of our trial. As soon as I got there, I felt a knot in my stomach. I was going to see Eric for the first time since I left. When he saw me enter the room, he immediately grimaced at me.
You bitch! What the hell do you think you're doing? Who took care of you all this time? You owe me!
He looked like he was about to jump on me, so the security and his lawyer restrained him and dragged him out of the hallway. I was horrified. Even if we divorced, he might take revenge. I could hear him screaming, and his lawyer said,
"It's gonna have a negative effect. And the worst case, the police."
Then it became quiet. We went through the hearing without an incident after that. Mark and I were offered to stay with Amy's parents for the time being. They ran a local diner and hired me as a waitress out of their kindness. In addition to that, they had an unused trailer in their backyard, which they offered us to stay in. One night, I don't know how they found out, but Eric's parents showed up at the house. They tried to cross the yard toward my trailer, and Amy's parents stopped them.
Hey, come out, you coward! Give us Mark!
I heard them shouting. Amy signed me to hide and went out to deal with them. If you don't leave now, we'll call the police. As she said this, she was already calling. They realized the seriousness and tried to run away, but Amy's parents held them in place. The policeman arrived within a minute. After hearing both sides, they escorted in-laws back to the car and made sure they drove away. I frantically apologized to Amy and her parents and started packing my things, but they stopped me and told me it was safer to stay with them. Your divorce drama is quite entertaining. I'm so geared up to fight with you. Wait. I felt threatened for my life here. Came to think of it, she was into Spanish soap operas. 2 months later, thanks to Adam, I was able to get good alimony, custody, and child support. I could finally cut all ties and move on with my life. I can live freely doing whatever I chose to do. I held Mark tightly in my arms. He needs to be reassured that I would always be by his side. Before I parted with Adam, I not only thanked him for the job he had done, but finally told him that I actually knew him from high school. He didn't remember me, but he was kind to tell me that I could count on him if there was anything. Later on, the rumor of my in-laws' incident spread in their neighborhood, and Eric too was seen by the neighbors as an abusive husband. They were too embarrassed that they moved to another town. Eric had sold a new apartment and paid me half of the profit. He was in debt from the trial and still had to pay me alimony and child support, so he lived in a trailer park. I had been afraid of his retaliation against me, but he wasn't as stupid as I thought. He never tried to get in touch with me. As for the in-laws, even after the first incident, they had been warned by the police. They kept coming to see me, so they eventually got arrested. After spending some time in the pen, they both got ill and were sent to a facility by Eric. As for me, I still work at the diner. Hey Stacy, have a break. Let's get something to eat. Thanks, yeah, let's eat. I take off my name tag and sit down in a booth. Amy joined with a cheeky smile on her face. So, how's it going with Adam? Direct to the point, huh? Of course, I want to know everything. Adam had asked me out a little after our last meeting, and we started seeing each other. He is supposed to meet Mark officially this weekend. I tell Amy about it. Wow, Mark's finally meeting him. Where are you guys going? Who suggested bringing Mark? She's so excited with many questions. Good food, good friends, and a re-encounter with my old crush. I've had terrible experiences, but I'm glad that I had the courage to get out of my old life, because now I'm standing at the end of the tunnel. I feel grateful and blessed to be able to stay with Mark more than anything. I will live my own life surrounded by good people supporting each other from now on.
My husband came to dishonor my family and me at my dad's funeral. He was faced with his own demon.
The old man's finally gone. He lived so long for nothing. Now you can claim his life insurance, right? I can finally be compensated for the misfortune of getting married to you. Show me how much you're getting now. I have no interest in joining your impoverished dad's hick funeral. The words that came out of my husband's mouth were no condolence, but pure insults to my dad and me at the funeral. Not only that, here, my contribution to a gift of assistance. Pick them up. Ching ching. He threw coins from his pocket at me and let out the scornful laugh. There was no sign of the kind man who gave me the lucky silver dime and encouragement in the past. How did it all come to this? My vision was blurred by tears of rage and misery. Suddenly, a man appeared in front of me. He plays a crucial part in what was to come next. I was 35 years old, working at a confectionery plant. My ex-husband and I met at the previous work. I was a fresh graduate and had no clue what I was doing at work. Why am I making so many mistakes? Everyone else but me is getting it right. I thought we all had minor flaws at first, but I kept struggling to learn the new tasks. We all worked independently, and the company didn't create a friendly environment to support each other, so I was totally lost. When I made mistakes, my colleagues were burdened. I was the type to drag my mistake with me, so I was getting crushed by their weight. One day, it became too much to bear, and I hid crying in a corner of a small kitchen at work. A guy who happened to find me there was my ex-husband. What's wrong? You want to talk?
Thank you. I made a mistake again. He was 2 years older than me and had been working there for a while. He listened to my gloom and doom and made me smile. What a nice guy, I thought to myself and calmed down a bit in his presence. My ex remembered something and pulled out his wallet. He picked a coin and said,
"This is a lucky silver dime from 1944. I hope this brings you much good luck. Here."
I swore to myself that I would always keep it with me no matter what. I was head over heels for him afterward and asked a colleague to help to get closer to him. We eventually started dating and fell in love with each other, so we got married. I was purely ecstatic about our happy life together, but there was one person who didn't agree with me. It was my dad, who was devoted his daily farm all his life. He was a man of few words and had never spoken to me much growing up, but he had a clear objection to my marriage.
"I believe it's a rush to get married to him now. I don't trust him. He looks like a nice guy, but I sense there is someone else hiding. You should wait a little longer and got to know him better."
Wait, I choose him. How do you know he is or isn't good for me after meeting him once? Besides, you've never given me any fatherly advice before, and now you put on your father's mask and give me a lecture? I am an adult. I don't need your permission. Hearing him against my decision for the first time, I became upset and blamed him more than I should have. He never said a word about it after that. I ignored his warning, got married, and left home. We had never gotten in touch since then. It's all good. I have my husband. I'm happy with my marriage. I chatted to myself and pretended there was nothing wrong in my life. The truth was, my reality wasn't going the way I imagined. A little after we got married, my ex started acting arrogant toward me.
"Hey, where's my dinner? Didn't I tell you to clean the house? Aren't you embarrassed living in a mess like this? I want to wear this tomorrow, so iron it. And don't forget to polish my shoes."
Even though he treated me badly, I tried my best to balance my work and home life. I managed to perfect housework, not to be criticized. My ex took it for granted and never showed his appreciation to me. Yay me! Good job!
Huh? Of course, you should be able to do all this as a wife. Your screw must be loose. Asking for a compliment. If this was praiseworthy, you should get on your knees and thank me for my job.
He got promoted to manager, which he used to disgrace me all the time.
All your work proposals are lame and boring. They show you were born and raised in the dead of the countryside. Your existence stinks of mud.
Not only he degraded me, but he also disrespected my family. I was getting fed up with him. In addition to this, he made fun of my hobby, which was drawing sketches of new dessert ideas. I was really into it and spent a lot of my time drawing. He shrugged them off and criticized them as terrible design and said I was wasting my time. In the end, he escalated to looking down on my family and the daily products that were sent to us.
Eh, smell of a savage. Send me T-bone instead. It's a shame your family is too poor to send me anything of value.
He spouted out his venom. What a moron. It was disgusting that he couldn't appreciate the kindness of others. I should have told him off, but I dislike confrontation and couldn't stand up for myself. I was also worried about being lost without him if he kicked me out. I wouldn't have had anywhere to go. The thought of it kept me from arguing with him. He knew he had control over me, so his behavior worsened. One day, I cooked a white stew using the milk from my family. As I kind of expected,
ew, it smells rancid. Stinks of poverty. I can't eat poor people's food.
He viciously criticized. To be honest, I was prepared for his slamming and was going to just shrug it off. But he went a step farther this time.
Before it stinks up the whole house with the odor of poverty, I'm gonna trash it. I feel like I'm in jail being served such food. Seriously, you're the worst wife.
He dumped the pot with stew inside into a bin. I finally exploded and started yelling. How could you throw the food I took time to make? You're disgusting to waste perfectly good food like that. Instead of apologizing, he snapped back.
Blah, blah, blah. You're so dull, useless, and annoying. Who do you think you're speaking to? I'm better than you. You're just the weight on my shoulders. Don't need you anymore.
And then he scornfully told me why he married me.
I thought a 35 years old hag would have a lot of savings. You seemed like you were out of the dating loop all your life. I just wanted to take your money and use you like a child robot. You wanted me anyway, so it's a win-win, right?
I was aghast by his unjust and malevolent revelation, and his nonchalant demeanor. Was the reason we delayed our marriage to make me save more money? It was all your scheme? My savings are almost gone because you've been splurging, you know.
You were right, but you never mentioned your savings are almost gone. How's that my fault? It's your job to take care of the finance, so you take responsibility. A penniless wife is of no value to me, lower than your farm animals.
He ranted in a vile manner, and then he suddenly pulled out my sketches from the shelf. He ripped the pages into pieces as he shouted, "Pathetic!" threw them all over the place, and walked out of the room. What have I ever done to you? I just tried to do my best to make our lives better. Of course, I couldn't sleep at all, but cried my eyes out that night. The next day,
"We're getting divorced. Get out."
He didn't even look up from the paper he was reading. Okay. I was thinking the same in bed last night, so I simply agreed with him. I collected my things in silence and left the house. When I stepped outside, the face of my dad, who disagreed with this marriage, popped into my head. He somehow knew we weren't going to work out. Why was I so adamant about his words back then? I'm very sorry, Dad. Tears welled up in my eyes. I wondered what he would say if I told him I was getting a divorce. Would he have been mad at me for not listening to him? Would he have been disappointed? He might no longer have spoken to our daughter, who snapped at him in the first place. I couldn't find answers to the questions, and I started living alone without the courage to go and tell him. I managed to find an apartment with my meager savings, but my ex spread a bad rumor about me, and I became very uneasy working there. I was mentally exhausted. When I was absent-mindedly going through job ads on the internet, I came across a listing of a bakery manufacturer. Working as a pâtissier used to be my dream. I may have been too old to change a career, but never try, never know. I was given a fresh start working at a manufacturer, and learning new skills gave me back the confidence. Once I was back to myself, I decided to do one thing I had been putting off. I planned to visit my dad and tell him about my divorce and a new career. That night, I got a call from my mom, who was sobbing. "Your dad passed away in the hospital today. Please come home. The memorial service is the day after." It was so sudden that my mind went blank. I immediately packed up my things and drove as fast as I could to the ranch. And then I saw him lying peacefully in a casket. It was too late. I was too late. When I saw the shriveled corpse of my dad, I finally got a grasp of the reality, and the waves of regret washed over me. I didn't come clean about my divorce, and never got to apologize to him. "Why did you leave so soon, Dad?" "I was going to tell you everything. I'm sorry for troubling you and not coming sooner." I soaked up my pillow with my tears all night without sleep. 2 days later, his memorial service took place at the ranch. I was too devastated that I was like a zombie. Then suddenly, my ex appeared before me. He learned about my dad's passing through a mutual friend. I expected him to mourn my dad as long as he was at the service, but my expectation was quickly shut down.
Hey, so when are you getting your inheritance? Since I took care of you, you need to pay me for that. I've waited so long for the country bumpkin to die. Anyway, a hillbill memorial is so plain, isn't it? Don't tell me you don't have money. Just sell this useless ranch to get more. It's your chance to make me think that I was lucky to have married you.
Even on such a solemn occasion, my ex showed his despicable self and tried to dishonor my dad and me. Leave now. There's no place for a vile man here. I was outraged by his immoral behavior. He didn't care and continued with his rant.
Pay me then, I will leave. I don't even want to be in this hick town. You always make things complicated with me, so it takes longer than needed. That's why I divorced you.
He sniggered, blaming me for our divorce. Even though we were at the far corner of the room, away from the others, people were starting to get curious about us.
Here, my contribution to a gift of assistance.
He suddenly put a scornful smile, as if a great idea came into his head, and shoved his hand in his pocket.
So the wicked perish at the presence of me.
He imitated a priest performing an exorcism and threw the coins at me. Ching ching. The sound of coins hitting the floor echoed through the room. He kept his dreadful smile on his face and picked up a dime from the floor. I exactly knew what he meant. Where did the kind guy I first met go? He gave me the lucky silver dime. How did it all come to this? My tears flowed uncontrollably from the despair. Then, a man walked up in front of me.
I apologize for my delay. My deep condolences to you. I'm very sorry about your dad.
A man in a luxurious suit spoke to me. My ex looked surprised and pushed me aside. He quickly put on a broad smile and raised his hand to shake the man's hand. The man happened to be his important contact for the big project he had been working on. He was blabbing non-stop to the man, who glanced at me over my ex's shoulder. My ex saw it and then started shaming me.
She's my useless ex-wife. She thinks crying would make everything better. She sits high up on the throne and have no intention of improving herself. I'm too ashamed that I was just giving her a lecture.
He laughed lightheartedly. He must have been high, thinking he looked like an authoritative figure. But the man remained stoic and spoke calmly.
I take back the contract with your company. What?
The blood drained from my ex's face hearing the man.
She is a key person in the project. I would never associate with a company that humiliates my excellent employee in public. This dull woman is your excellent employee? Must be some mistake.
Ignoring my ex, who was going frantic, the man called his boss on the spot and said the contract had been cancelled. Then my ex's phone rang immediately after. His voice was trembling and kept apologizing into his phone. My dad's ranch was a small scale, but the quality of his product was known to be one of the best in the industry. The taste was even praised by famous pâtissiers. It was a pure coincidence that I started working at my current job. My big boss was a fan of my dad's milk and butter, and trusted my sense of taste that had been nurtured by the top quality. My dad didn't tell my ex about his ranch in detail, and I too never boasted about my family business, so he never found out the truth. Looking back on it, I thought maybe my dad was testing his character. My ex finished his call and turned to me with a ghost-like face. He must have thought that his career was over without this project. He all of a sudden changed his demeanor and pleaded with me.
Please, talk to him. and make him change his mind. I didn't really mean to harm you. Please forgive me.
An apology only for the sake of self-preservation. I had reached my boiling point and let out all my frustration to him.
Huh? You self-centered bastard?
What are you talking about? Do you think crying would make things better? Right back at you. One of the sketches you tore apart that day is the origin of this project. Now you want to sell my lame crepe made with my dad's milk that you said stunk of poverty? The project that my ex was working on for the company was the sales of crepes I created and supervised using a cream made from fresh milk from my dad's ranch. When he found out the detail,
No one told me. Why haven't you mentioned it to me?
He snapped at me and kicked the chairs around him. The man stoically picked up the chairs and put them back in place.
You may not realize, but there are many people from our industry here. There is no point in resisting anymore. Your misdemeanor will be spread in no time. You have no place.
My ex fell to the floor in desperation and pleaded with me.
Please help me. I'm gonna lose everything. I apologize for what I have done, so please.
He clung to me miserably. Well, I owe you for something. I intentionally used a sweet tone of voice. He looked up at me smiling, thinking he was saved. Looking at my egocentric ex, I hammered the final nail in the coffin. This would be my last payment to you. I grabbed the lucky silver coin he gave me when we first met from my purse, lowered it to his eye level, and then dropped it on the floor. You make your own luck. Hope you understand that someday. He was stunned and frozen like a statue. Ironically, the table had turned and he started bawling. Be quiet! You still want to keep distracting the memorial? Stop acting like a baby. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? You're the lamest person right now. Good riddance to bad luck. There was absolutely nothing he could do or say, so he ran out of the house with his tail between his legs. A week after my dad's funeral, my ex, who was responsible for the failure of the project, was severely reprimanded by his superiors. When he was kicked out of the team, it was discovered that the project budget had been embezzled by him. He was fired from the company and criminally charged. He became exhausted by the fact that all his bad deeds had come back to him. He finally learned his lesson and supposedly was living in a shabby apartment alone. My dad's ranch was decided to be run by his loyal staff who had inherited his motto. They maintained the same quality of products and were gradually expanding the scale of their business. The man who canceled the project told me that he knew my dad for a long time. He met up with my dad after I was hired by his company. Your daughter is putting a lot of effort into her work amidst her divorce. I would like to support her as much as I can. He had blurted out about my divorce, but I was thankful that my dad at least knew.
Oh, she's divorcing. I guess my instinct was right. It's heartbreaking to know that she was being abused by that fool, and even my family was disrespected. Knowing her well, I worry that she pushed herself too much. I'm ashamed of myself for not reaching out to her when she was suffering. I want to watch her rebuild her own happy life from now on.
Even though he was told about the bad news of my divorce, he apparently looked relieved.
It may be just my wish, but I believe she would be an outstanding patissier. I know I'm asking a lot from you, but please look after my daughter.
My dad held the man's hand tightly in both of his for a while. I couldn't stop crying while I was listening to the story. Finally finding out what my dad thought of me made me feel so grateful. I had been hating myself for being miserable and crying in front of my ex-husband. I felt that I could really look forward and build my own life now. I'm sorry, Dad, for not being at your side in your last moments. There have been many struggles, but I'm better now. I'm living a full life, learning to be a patissier. I'm going to use a lot of your products that you conserved all those years. Please watch over me from heaven. Love you so much. With my heart full of gratefulness to my dad. I promise to keep working hard to be a good patissier, as he believed.
My 54-year-old husband was in love with a 24-year-old and divorced me without realizing what devastation was to come.
An old hag like you isn't worth having as my wife. I'm divorcing you.
My husband I had been with for a long time said. I swallowed my arguments and reluctantly accepted his demand. He hadn't realized what a fool he was then. My name is Christy. I had been supporting my husband Dan while working as a nurse. His salary had been raised a little by little over the years, but it still wasn't possible to live solely on his paycheck. We had our struggles, but we made it to this day by supporting each other. 30 years had passed since we got married. It had been wonderful for me. I enjoy balancing home and work life, and above all, being with Dan was still my greatest joy. We didn't want to have kids, so spending our time together without distractions was pure bliss every night. Dan never strayed from the marriage and put all his effort into his work for us. Maybe he wasn't so good at it, so it took a little longer to be promoted compared to his peers, but I didn't care. Better than having him overworked and end up in the hospital. It was a time for fresh graduates to join his company.
Hey, guess what? I am appointed as a trainer of new employees for the first time.
Wow, congrats! You're finally recognized. He downed a beer happily without leaving a drop at dinner. Before him, the role was taken by his peers and seniors. After all, it was an important position that could only be entrusted to employees who produce a certain level of results. He had finally been appointed for that. Watching him animated with joy made me delighted.
Maybe I will get a raise if I do well and put more effort into my other job too.
Don't push yourself too hard. I took a real drink myself as I nudged an elated Dan. I had no doubt about us continuing to have a happy life forever, even though there was no promise for the future. Dan welcomed the new employee, Mary, as his trainee. She was beautiful and charming, so her co-workers treated her fondly. The ones with a big age gap saw her as their daughter, and the ones close to her age eyed her as their potential girlfriend. Everyone was attentive to her, and Dan, who was closer to her than anyone else, got to see her charms up close. She naturally relied on him for anything. Whenever he taught her a job, she thanked him with a smile. For someone who rarely got praised, being appreciated by her made him truly happy. He was fond of her as a trainee at first, but before he knew it, he was enamored by her. Eventually, he started to mention her at home. I could sense a strange intimacy in his words, even though he said she was a pain in the neck. I had been with him for so long that I had no intention to be suspicious and question him. I became more mature and wiser. I thought it was no big deal if a rare occasion of having a young and cute girl around delighted him. I get excited too when I see a good-looking guy, but it was only an attraction and nothing compared to love. I believe it was the same for Dan. I pushed my anxiety all the way to the back of my head, but his merry fever continued without a sign of coming down. On the contrary, it grew hotter and hotter.
Mary is a true beauty. It's not just because she's young. It must be her effort she puts into it. Maybe you will look better if you put more effort too.
He started saying a terrible thing he had never done before.
Oh man, why haven't you done it? Mary would have taken the initiative. I guess she's very different from you after all.
He compared me to her at every opportunity and sighed heavily. As you would think, I got a bad feeling. The hunch soon became a certainty.
Please divorce me.
When we were eating dinner, he said as if he was commenting on the weather.
You're okay being alone, right?
I was speechless, and he carried on.
Mary is so vulnerable. Compared to you, she needs me. I turn out to be a kind of a man someone can rely on,
he joyfully said as he raised his left hand in front of my face and pointed to the wedding band the same as mine.
Mary complimented me when she saw this. She said it was wonderful that I have been cherishing you for 30 years and admired me.
Seeing him as cheery as a child, I could only feel sorry for him. Mary was talking about a guy who cherished me. She never mentioned a guy who divorces me for her. He was completely drowned in and blinded by the love not suited for his age. Wait, why don't you think about it a little more?
I did, and this is my conclusion. You became an old hag anyway. You're not worth being my wife. I'm a man respected by such a young girl.
He called me an old hag, and I wondered if he hadn't noticed the deep crow's feet around his smiling eyes, if he hadn't seen his receding hairline a year by year, and if he hadn't considered his far out of the fashion that made him look like an old-timer. Okay, if you say that much, but you won't regret it?
Of course not.
He nodded confidently and guzzled a beer like it was a celebration. It was so sudden and I couldn't think straight, so I asked him to give me some time. The next day, I decided to investigate the relationship between Dan and Mary and called a friend who also worked with them. I had been married for so long that I got to know some of his colleagues well. I never thought that I would use this friendship for something like this though. After briefing a friend over the phone, she made time to meet me. How have you been? You got some drama going on. I know, right? I'm so confused about this. I felt more embarrassed than anxious, but I asked her what she had seen and heard in the office. Honestly, everyone knows Dan is chasing after Mary. She rolled her eyes and smiled. He had never been depended on before. It must have gone straight to his head. He seems to be confused with the feeling of gratitude and love. Does Mary seem to feel the same toward him? Let me ask you instead, do you think so? A charming girl who everyone likes? I shook my head no. I haven't said a word to Dan, but she is aware of his feeling toward her. She was trying to find the right words, but gave up and let out a small sigh. How to say this? She says his approach is wearing her out. I forgot my anger for a moment and felt pity for him. I was right. Dan was drowning in self-satisfied love. He wasn't able to differentiate praise in recognition of the man and a genuine appreciation for a colleague who taught her the job. Mary didn't want him to have a wrong idea, so she commented on his wedding ring. But I guess he took it the opposite of what she aimed for. He even showed off his bare ring finger in front of her. I'm so embarrassed for him. I fanned my face with a hand to cool off, but it was adamant just like Dan's self-satisfied love. My friend told me more about Mary, and I became interested to meet her in person. My friend called her on the spot. She agreed to come out right away. In a short while, a pretty girl walked up to our table. Hi, I'm Mary. It's my pleasure to meet you. She had a very good manner for a young girl. I thanked her for coming out and prompted her to sit across from me. I'm sorry to bother you out of the blue. As you already know, I'm Dan's wife. He has been a wonderful trainer to me. She smiled like an angel. It sounds like he has been giving you unwanted attention. She became a little awkward and nodded her head. He's very good at explaining the job, but he's an idiot. I apologize on behalf of him. Seeing her reaction, I had no doubt that he was nothing but a nuisance to her. I actually have a boyfriend. Oh, I didn't know. It seemed Dan never even checked if she was already in a relationship. Apparently, her boyfriend worked for a different company his father founded, which meant he was a successor. While he was in a training to be the future CEO, she refused to depend on him and held a job of her own to build a healthy relationship. They planned to get engaged once his training was finished, and then get married and move overseas when his transfer was decided. It sounded like she had a bright future ahead of her. Listening to her fearlessness, I felt like I was hearing myself when I was younger. I too wanted to build a strong marriage and worked hard alongside Dan for 30 years. The marriage I treasured wasn't as important to him as to me. The truth was swallowing up my emotions. I see, then cut Dan out of your life completely. You're a beautiful girl. Watch out for many more creeps that come close to you. I envy and admire your future. We continued to chit-chat for a little more until they had to go back to the office. On the way back home, I stopped at the attorney's office and discussed my divorce. Dan was supposed to come back home for dinner. I normally cook myself, but I had to take away pork chops and champagne that night.
Is it your birthday today?
No, it's for our farewell. I told him that I went to see a lawyer who would contact him shortly. His face was stunned for a second, but immediately changed to a big smile.
Thank you.
I'm starving, but let's have a look at the terms I proposed before we eat. While I set up the table, he hummed some light-hearted tunes as he went through them. He was scribbling additional notes in a way his pen was dancing in the air. What a cheerful handwriting compared to the gloom I felt seeing the lawyer. We eventually had our last supper together. He must have been relieved to get rid of an old hag like me. He downed 2 cans of beer. I picked up the cans laying next to him, who was dozing off on the sofa, and brought them to the kitchen. Before dropping them in a bin, I crushed one of them as hard as I could with my hand, and then I dropped the deformed can into a bin. Goodbye, good riddance, I whispered to Dan, who was sleeping and left the home I spent 30 years of my life with him. While waiting for the divorce to finalize, I found a new apartment and moved in. I had been working all this time, so there was no financial hardship to start my new life. Contrary to my worry, it was refreshing and carefree to work and cook for myself. I enjoyed my new life feeling like a young singleton once again. The portion of money I used to buy beers for Dan went to my new cosmetic and clothes instead. I felt myself brightening up. As for Dan, he depended all of the housework on me, so he started to look shabbier and shabbier, which eventually made Mary keeping distance from him. In addition to the already apparent signs of aging, he became even more careless. No wonder she didn't feel good being around him. Still, he mistook her distance for shyness, not disgust, and to everyone's surprise, he proposed to her. Of course, he was declined. It was an unforeseen event for him, and still he couldn't easily give up on a girl he chose over his marriage. Again, to everyone's surprise, he intruded on her apartment, and her boyfriend called the police. He was almost taken by the police, but Mary refused to put a charge on him out of her kindness. The matter was settled with a stern warning. The bad reputation at his work didn't settle as quickly as incident. Soon, he was known to be a creep who divorced his wife to become a stalker. Undeniable rumors were spreading throughout the company. He was never a prominent worker, so the company easily dismissed him. He was abandoned again. Out of desperation, he started gambling with all the money he had. After seeing Mary's boyfriend, he believed she would change her mind once he became rich. Of course, he had no talent or luck in gambling. Only the ever-increasing debt had kept him company. He finally had to sell the apartment we lived in and moved into a trailer park. Even in such a miserable state, he still had Mary in his heart. He waited for her outside of his old office, but he never got to see her again. She had gotten married and had already moved abroad with her husband. He was in total despair without any emotional support and gave me a call after a long while. His voice over the phone sounded way older than I remembered, like he aged years in a matter of several months. "Please, take me back." His voice trembled. I was silent for a moment and then spoke softly. Our relationship was trashed into a bin with a can of beer that night. Goodbye. He was calling my name as I hung up on him, and then I blocked him for good. I put my phone in a bag and went out. The friend who told me about Dan and Mary was coming out to dinner with me. Having a new fulfilled life, I had told her that I wanted to go to a good steakhouse. Pork chop? Okay, but why? For farewell? What the... I was walking in the air from the excitement to celebrate the true end of my old chapter.
Let's go to Florida for our honeymoon, but how about we do it in 2 weeks?
2 months before our wedding, Warren suddenly came up with this idea. Reluctantly, I started to rearrange our plans. But then he dropped an even more astonishing idea.
Oh, right. I've decided to take my mom and her friend with us on our honeymoon. So yeah, please include that in the changes to the plan.
What? I was completely taken aback. Who brings their mother and her friend on their honeymoon? That's just not happening. A honeymoon with your mom and her friend tagging along? No way, Warren. At this, his mood suddenly turned sour.
What? You're trying to exclude my mom?
But it's our honeymoon. Isn't it normal for just the two of us to go?
My mom's lonely. It wouldn't hurt to take her along for the trip. You really are a cold-hearted wife, aren't you? Listen, the trip is a done deal. You arrange everything for 4 people, okay?
He turned away from me and went to the bedroom. At that moment, I was quietly seething with anger. The thought of my mother-in-law and her friend crashing our honeymoon and my husband siding with her was unbearable. If that's how they're going to play it, I have a plan of my own. And so I set my plan in motion, which would soon leave my foolish husband and mother-in-law in a state of utter shock and panic. My name is Kim, 28 years old. I'm skilled in crafts and have been working as a handmade artist since I was young. Now I even run a small craft class. Most of my students are women in their 50s and 60s who have finished raising their children. One of my students is a woman named Sandra. She's a cheerful person, well-liked by everyone, and I like her too. One day, she said to me, "Kim, you're single, right? Do you have someone you're seeing?" "No, I've been too busy with work." "How about my friend's son? I've known him since he was little, and he's quite the handsome guy. He's an insurance salesman." And that's how I was introduced to Warren, who would later become my husband. He was 2 years older than me, working as an insurance salesman. As Sandra had described, he was quite handsome and was pleasant to be with. I was taken with him. He seemed to like me too, and we started dating. 2 years later, he proposed to me.
Kim, marry me. I promise to make you happy.
Oh, Warren, thank you. I'm so happy. And so we got engaged. My parents approved of our marriage, and next, we went to his parents' house. His father greeted us with a smile.
Oh, I've heard all about you from Warren. It's great to meet you.
Behind him stood his mother, with a kind face. Warren introduced me to his parents.
This is Kim. We're getting married.
Howard nodded approvingly.
Yes, you have our blessing. Right, honey?
Warren's mother, Stacy, smiled and nodded.
Of course. You two met through my friend, Sandra, right? She'll be thrilled to hear about your marriage.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Morgan. I was relieved that our marriage introduction went well. Stacy didn't talk much, but seemed to approve of the marriage. Howard was a very nice person. We set up our new home just 10 minutes away from their house. The wedding was scheduled for 6 months later on our anniversary. Just when I was getting serious about the preparations, we received news that Howard had collapsed. By the time we got to the hospital, it was too late. He had passed away from heart failure. Stacy clung to her husband, weeping, and Warren comforted her. Remembering the kind father-in-law from our marriage meeting, I too was in tears. After the funeral, we decided to postpone our wedding for a year, as it was too soon. Concerned about his mother, Warren frequently visited her home, and I went with him to look after her.
Mom, we're back. How are you doing?
He asked his mother with concern. She replied in a faint voice.
I'm still struggling to recover. I've been neglecting the housework.
Indeed, unwashed dishes had piled up, and the housekeeping seemed neglected. Stacy, please rest. I'll take care of the housework.
Thank you, Kim.
And so for several months, I took care of her housework. I didn't mind it, as I sympathized with her loss. However, she gradually became more demanding.
Kim, I meant to tell you earlier, but you're folding the laundry wrong.
Oh?
I want the towels folded like this. Oh, and can you wash the curtains too? For dinner tonight, let's have some meat.
Okay. 6 months after her husband's passing, her complexion had improved, and she seemed to be regaining her energy. Yet she kept finding more chores for me to do, and her requests were getting more demanding. On the way back, I spoke to Warren. Hey, your mom seems to be getting better, doesn't she?
Well, she's certainly improved since my dad passed away.
I think it might be time for me to stop doing the housework.
What? My mom's alone and struggling. Helping out with the housework is the least you can do. She's my mother, you know?
Oh, right. Since he felt this way, I continued to go to his mother's house and do her housework, but we had our own things to take care of. Since our wedding had been postponed, we had to start looking for a new venue. The original venue was unavailable on the date we wanted because another wedding was scheduled. On the day Warren and I were visiting various venues, he took a different route in his car. Wait, shouldn't we have gone straight to the venue?
Yeah, I decided to bring Mom along.
What? Your mom is coming with us to check out the venues?
She wanted to come, so I couldn't say no.
When we got to her house, Stacy got into the car with a big smile. In front of her, all I could do was force a smile. The venue hunting didn't go well after that. Wow, this place is lovely. I've always dreamed of having a cozy, intimate wedding at a venue like this. To this, Stacy frowned.
No, this place is too plain. It's not suitable for Warren's wedding. Let's look at other places.
After that, she kept criticizing our choices of venues. In the end, we couldn't decide on a venue that day. That night, I told my husband. I'd prefer if we could pick out the venue just the two of us. It's hard to decide with your mom there.
What? Are you trying to exclude her?
It's not like that. It's just that it's our wedding and I want us to decide together.
Kim, you're so cold-hearted. She's the only family I have left. Of course, she's excited about my wedding. You should listen to her opinion too.
I can't believe this. Since his father's passing, Warren had become overly protective of his mother. He was always on her side, hardly considering my opinions. I continued to do chores for her, and my opinions on our wedding preparations were constantly overruled. The stress kept building up, and I couldn't hide my exhaustion. Then, during a rare visit to my craft class, Sandra, my mother-in-law's friend, noticed my state.
Kim, you look tired. Are you okay?
Sandra, yes, I'm fine. Just managing, you know.
Really? Well, if you say so.
I returned her concern with a weak smile. At that time, I was feeling desperate. The wedding was 3 months away, but we were struggling to save enough money. The amount Warren was putting into our joint account was less than he had told me before. One day, I asked him about it. Hey, Warren, the money coming in is less than what you mentioned. Why is that? He avoided my gaze, looking uneasy.
That's because I've been sending money to Mom.
What? You're sending her money? I didn't know about this. How much?
$700 a month.
$700? I was shocked. We had never discussed this.
I have to. Dad's gone and Mom has never worked.
He got defensive before I could say more. It was always Mom, Mom with him. I wondered if I could really have a future with him. I was concerned. With only 2 months left until the wedding, he suddenly said to me,
About our honeymoon in Florida? Let's go in 2 weeks.
What? But we haven't even had our wedding yet. Aren't we supposed to go on our honeymoon after the ceremony? He looked puzzled at my surprise.
I couldn't find any other time that worked, so we have to do it then.
You couldn't get time off? Well, if that's the case, I guess I'll have to change the travel plans. As I took out my phone to make changes, he dropped a bombshell.
All right. I've decided to take my mom and her friend with us on the honeymoon. Please include that in the new plan.
What? I was absolutely stunned. Who brings their mother and her friend on a honeymoon? Oh, wait, what do you mean? Your mom and her friend are coming too?
The friend is Sandra, the one who introduced us. My mom mentioned the trip, and she wanted to come.
Sandra was a sensible person. If she knew it was our honeymoon, she wouldn't come. That meant my mother-in-law must have left out that detail. That's just not happening. A honeymoon with your mom and her friend? Unbelievable. He suddenly looked annoyed.
What? You want to exclude my mom?
But it's our honeymoon. Isn't it normal for just us to go?
My mom is lonely. It wouldn't hurt to take her on the trip. You really are a cold-hearted wife, aren't you? Listen, the trip is a done deal. You arrange everything for 4 people, okay?
He turned away and went to the bedroom. I was quietly furious. The thought of my mother-in-law and her friend crashing our honeymoon, and my husband siding with her, was unbearable. If that's how they're going to play it, I have a plan of my own. And so, I hashed a plan. On the day of the trip, Warren, his mother, and I were heading to the airport. We were supposed to meet Sandra there. Stacy was in high spirits, chattering nonstop. Warren was smiling too. Sitting beside them, I smirked to myself. As we were in the airport lobby, Sandra approached us.
Sorry I'm late. Thanks for inviting me today. Now that everyone's here, let's go.
As she was about to move, I quickly spoke up. All right, have a great trip. What? The 3 of them looked at me in shock. I handed them 2 plane tickets. They were in Warren and Sandra's names. Stacy, puzzled, spoke up.
Have a great trip? What are you talking about? And what's with these tickets? There's only for Warren and Sandra.
I answered firmly. Yes, I only booked tickets for Warren and Sandra.
What?
All three of them looked at me in shock.
Hey, Kim, what's this joke? What about my mom's ticket? And what about you?
I'll be taking a different flight to my parents' house to tell them that the engagement has been called off.
What?
Once again, their eyes widened in surprise. Sandra hurriedly spoke to me.
Wait a minute. What's going on here? Why would you do this? And call off the engagement?
So I told her, Sandra, did you know today was supposed to be my honeymoon with Warren?
What? No way, I didn't know that.
She looked shocked, and I calmly explained. Actually, I've been forced to do housework by Stacy, and she's been interfering with our wedding plans. I've been tolerating it until today. But when I found out Warren was secretly sending $700 a month to his mother...
What? $700 a month?
That was the last straw for me, especially when I heard about this honeymoon plan with his mom and you. That's why I decided to take this action. She looked dumbfounded at my mother-in-law. Stacy turned red and lashed out.
How dare you? You're just a daughter-in-law, and calling off the engagement? I won't allow such selfish behavior.
Then Sandra spoke up.
Stacy, weren't you bragging to everyone that your son gives you $350 a month?
My show-off mother-in-law had been telling everyone about that, apparently. I was just dumbfounded. Sandra continued relentlessly.
While we're at it, I've heard you've been seen walking arm in arm with a young flashy man in the neighborhood. You're not spending Warren's money on him, are you?
What? A young man?
Warren was the first to react with astonishment. Seemingly defeated, Stacy started to stomp her feet in frustration.
I can't help it. I've been lonely since I became alone.
Sandra spoke to her admonishingly.
Look, it's not normal for a mother to overwork her daughter-in-law, interfere in her son's marriage, and then crash their honeymoon. I'm going to distance myself from you, Stacy. No, if I'm disliked by you, the neighborhood leader, then...
My mother-in-law tried to reconcile, but Sandra turned away.
Mom, you're using the money I gave you on escort services?
He confronted her, and she started stammering in a panic. Then Warren turned to me, lowering his head.
Kim, I'm sorry. I won't let my mom bother you anymore, so please reconsider calling off the engagement. Please.
Hearing him, I snapped. After all this time siding with your mom, you have the nerve to say that. I'm done with a mama's boy like you. I'll make sure you pay for the wedding cancellation fees. Be ready for that.
No.
I threw my engagement ring at him right there. Stacy stood there in shock, watching everything unfold. Warren ended up being responsible for the wedding and trip cancellation fees. However, having given most of his savings to his mother, he was now nearly broke. After I left, he became unruly, often late or absent from work, and eventually got fired. Jobless, he moved back to his mother's house. But due to his mother spending the inheritance on her escort, they were living a difficult life. Stacy became a recluse after Sandra spread rumors about her, unable to even find work. Now, they are on the brink of having to sell their family home. Hearing this, I can only think, they got what they deserved. As for me, I've started living alone after breaking off the engagement. My craft class is doing well, and after starting to post my work on social media, I was even approached by a publisher to write a book. This has led to a significant increase in my students, and I'm not struggling financially. Sandra apologized for her role in the situation, but we continue to have a good teacher-student relationship. I'm determined to keep working hard and live my life happily.